Pascha at the Duckpond by Mother Melania, illustrated by Case Halsell. It was Lent at the Duckpond, and Rigid Rooster was having a good Lent. At least, he thought he was having a good Lent. He knew all the rules and he kept them. And he made sure everyone knew that he kept them. And he thought it was his job to make sure everyone else kept them too. Capers the cat paid no attention to Lent. "I have to drink milk every day," he would say. "How else can my beautiful orange coat keep its sheen? And I don't have time to make special meals for myself. And anyway, look at Rigid Rooster. If keeping Lent makes me like that, I'm much better off the way I am." One day, Rigid was going to visit Henry Hamster, who was sick with a bad cold. On his way, Rigid happened to see Capers the cat drinking a bowl of milk. "Capers!" cried Rigid, shocked. "It's Lent! You shouldn't be drinking milk!" Capers didn't even bother answering him. He just kept drinking his milk, but he muttered to himself, "I'm glad I'm not like that." Soon Rigid arrived at Henry's house. "Henry," said Rigid, "I brought you a vaporizer. You know how easily hamsters get pneumonia." "Thanks, Rigid," said Henry. "That was kind of you." Rigid thought the same thing. He smiled and said, "I try to do extra good deeds in Lent. It's important, you know." Henry just smiled and thanked Rigid again. Then he asked him if he would like to stay a little while. "No thanks, Henry," Rigid said. "I have a long list of other good deeds I need to do. I'll see you later." "Okay," Henry smiled, "and thanks again." Shortly after Rigid left, Charity the church mouse came by, carrying a thermos of soup. "Hi, Henry," Charity said. "I thought this might help warm you up." Henry thanked her and asked her to sit down. Charity was never too busy to spend time with a friend, so she sat a while with Henry. Right away she noticed that he didn't have a coat or a blanket. He was too poor. The next day, the mailman arrived at the door with a warm, new coat and a woolen blanket. There was no note and no name on the package, but Henry was pretty sure who sent them. As he put them on, he thought of Charity's threadbare coat. "God bless Charity," he said, with tears in his eyes. Lent continued. Rigid kept following all the rules. He even did more than the rules said. He did more prostrations, ate less, and drank less than all the other animals. He got more and more tired, but he didn't stop. He wanted this to be his best Lent ever. Capers kept doing what he always did. He ate what he liked and did whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. Henry was sick for the rest of Lent. His doctor told him he needed milk and oil and other foods to help make him well, and he was too sick to do much for anybody. But he was thankful. Charity visited Henry every day. She always brought him a thermos of soup, and whenever he needed something, it always showed up on his doorstep. Charity didn't think she was doing a good deed, though. She admired Henry and was grateful to have him as a friend. Finally, Pascha came. All the animals waited outside the church. Fearless the fire duck was ready to help any animals that set their hair on fire with the candles. Polly, the paramedic parrot, was present. Charity and Henry were there too. Henry was still sick, but he was well enough now that Charity was able to bring him to church in a wheelchair. The whole Duckpond was there, all except Capers and Rigid. Maybe you're not surprised that Capers wasn't there, but what about Rigid? Charity noticed that Capers and Rigid were missing, so she asked Fearless to stay with Henry and got Polly to come with her. First, they went to Rigid's house. He had passed out from not eating or drinking enough. Polly took him to the hospital, where he had to stay for several days till he was better. While Polly took Rigid to the hospital, Charity went looking for Capers. He was sitting in his house, looking a little lonesome. "Why don't you come to church, Capers?" asked Charity. If anyone else had asked that, Capers would just have laughed. But he loved Charity, so he said, "Well, I don't really like going to church, but I'll come because you asked." Capers and Charity got back to the church just in time to see the people come out. All the animals followed the procession, carrying their candles. Charity couldn't hold one because she needed both hands to push Henry's wheelchair, and Henry was still too weak. But it didn't matter. Their faces were brighter than candles. After the people went back into the church, the animals crowded around the windows so that they could hear what was happening. This is what they heard. "If anyone has labored from the first hour, let him today receive his just reward. If anyone has come at the third hour with thanksgiving, let him keep the feast. If anyone has arrived at the 6th hour, let him have no misgivings, for he shall suffer no loss. If anyone has delayed until the 9th hour, let him draw near without hesitation. If anyone has arrived even at the 11th hour, let him not fear on account of his delay." And the song written here is "Christ is risen. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life." Capers brushed away a tear. He looked at the bright faces of his friends. They were so bright that he couldn't look at them very long. He turned to Charity and said, "I don't deserve to be here, but thank you for inviting me." And then, though he didn't know it, his face became as bright as theirs. After church, Capers, Henry, and Charity went to see Rigid. Rigid had been thinking. "Hi, Rigid," Charity said. "I hope you're doing better. I'm sorry you missed Pascha. You've never missed it before." Rigid looked at the bright faces of Capers, Henry, and Charity, and his eyes watered up. "No, I think I have always missed Pascha," Rigid replied, "but maybe you can teach me how not to miss it next year." They all smiled. Rigid hadn't missed Pascha after all. The end.